Hello, everybody. Welcome to Spiritual Awakening 101. My name is Jerry Yakov, and I'm your host. I'm also a student and teacher of spirituality and metaphysics. Today, we're going to go into what is known in the Buddhist tradition as the beginner's mind. Beginner's mind is a willingness to learn at every stage of one's life, rather than adopting an expert's point of view, knowing it all. I'm going to read first of all from Science of Mind magazine. This is the April edition of Science of Mind magazine. And here it's entitled on the topic of beginner's mind. It says, To know is to be ignorant. To not know is the beginning of wisdom. And that's a quote from J. Krishnamurti. And here's a quote from Ernest Holmes, the founder of the Science of Mind. Should all the wisdom of the universe be poured over us, we should yet receive only that which we are ready to understand. And here's a short story exemplifying the beginner's mind. John Randolph Price relates in A Spiritual Philosophy of the New World how a woman at one of his retreats asked him for advice about a challenge she was facing. When he told her his answer, she replied, "I already know that." Price writes, "The truth is, if she really knew that, the challenge wouldn't have entered her life in the first place." He went on, "Maybe it's time to bring some humility into our lives and admit that we do not have all the answers. And maybe it's time to start practicing the truth we so eagerly share with others, so we can be the teachers of wisdom that we were sent to be." And then he goes on, one of the hallmarks of spiritual maturity is the willingness to be a lifelong learner. The Buddhists call this beginner's mind. Whether we're learning a new language or we've been studying spiritual concepts for years, we keep our minds open and free of preconceived ideas. Shunryu Suzuki wrote, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few." And here's the affirmation for this particular day's entry. I practice the concept of beginner's mind, opening my mind to new revelations. Well, I'm going to spend the rest of this episode expanding on this idea of beginner's mind. First of all, I do want to admit, having had delusions of expertise, and I found that to be a very difficult time in my life because lacking in humility, but um, obtaining a lot of knowledge, I thought I could share it and people would willingly come and listen. And of course, a lack of humility is not helpful in relationships. And relationships is the key, I think, to a teaching situation. One has to be exemplary of an open mind and teaching to someone who is a what I'll call happy learner and similarly has a beginner's mind. These are all important facets of a relationship that where I can learn from others in relationships. And as it says in this reading, I can assume my rightful position and function and purpose as a teacher of God, which is the reason that we're all here. We're both students to learn our identities in Christ, and we're also here to learn and to teach by example that we've actualized our identities in Christ. Once this is uh, really, I think, well internalized, it's a wonderful lesson to learn because I think humility is so close to being loving and kind. One who's arrogant and doing somebody else, let's say, a good deed because we're capable and they're not, is not being very helpful whatsoever. The true nature, I think, of the Good Samaritan is one who does the goodness of their Christ heart uh, because they know that they could be in that situation. And maybe they remember when they were in that situation and needed help. There is none among us who has not similarly been situated, either as the person in need or the person who is extending a helping Christ like hand. But in any case, having a beginner's mind opens the door to a relationship with Jesus, because Jesus is the teacher in my spiritual path with whom I have a relationship. And if, as in the case of this woman at the retreat, she says, "Well, I already knew that," she said to the retreat leader. And, he felt that if she'd already known that, it wouldn't have been a question and it wouldn't have been troubling circumstances in her life. So, all of this is very important, needless to say. But the practice of it, uh, the humility, the beginner's mind. Jesus said to his disciples, "Let go of everything and follow me." I think what he was saying, in his case, of course, he was totally self-actualized and knew his Christed self. So that wasn't a problem for him to say to his disciples, his followers, "You need to let go of everything that you think you know. Let go of everything that you think is etched in stone, because it's not that way at all. And follow me. Not necessarily do what I'm telling you to do, but follow my example." I think there is a great lesson to be learned. I remember a story about the Buddha, who was met on the road by a villager who asked what was so special about the Buddha. And the Buddha said, "Well, in my case, there's nothing special. You and I are the same, except I'm awake." So being awake, I think, at least in the phases that we're talking about of our learning and becoming spiritually awakened, includes humility. Um, I can't imagine going into a college level course, and many of us have been to college, of course, and saying to the instructor, "Well, I'm here just for the credits, but I already know everything in the book that you'll be using, and I know everything that you're going to be teaching." It wouldn't be a useful experience for the student, and of course, it would be an interesting experience for the teacher, because he probably or she probably knows that they would have their hands full with this particular student. There's another Buddhist story that I like, and this one exemplifies, I think, quite nicely the idea of emptying one's mind and being a beginner at all phases of learning. It seems that a seeker went to a guru, and the guru began a tea ceremony with the student. And so the guru began pouring tea, and he poured it into the cup of the student. But he kept pouring and pouring, and it went over the cup, onto the saucer, onto the table, and yet the guru continued to pour the tea, and it went on the floor. Well, the student was, totally aghast, and he said, uh, "Guru, what are you doing? All this tea is going on the floor." And the guru said, "Well, like your mind, this teacup was already full when I continued to pour, and it couldn't hold anymore. And similarly, your mind holds what you think is so much that there's no way I can continue teaching you and have any room for new insights and revelations to fill your mind. It's already too full." Well, I think this is a good story as well, because um, we never know, do we? Am I being humble? Am I being open? I know I continue to go into learning situations, and I think all things are lessons God would have us learn. And I already decide in my mind, well, this situation is not conducive to learning. This situation involves people with whom I have prior experience, and there's nothing I can learn from them. Just being aware of that, nevertheless, having that thought, but being aware of it and shining some light on it is a very high state of spirituality in my estimation. And the reason I say that is because we can't necessarily proactively stop those negative thoughts and lack of humility. However, we can choose again. We can choose rather quickly to say, oh, I'm doing it again. I've decided wrongly, and I want to turn to Jesus, who's my teacher, and ask that there be, shown to me another way, a better way. And in that showing, I continue to learn motivations for humility. I also find that how much I love the people that I'm surrounded with, contrary to my initial experience, where I may have been disappointed that so and so was in the group, or I was arrogant. I know something and these people don't. We're all emissaries of the Christ and the Christ itself. Granted, some of us may be further down the path in terms of actualizing the Christ itself and living from that place of divinity. However, that doesn't mean that the potential isn't within everybody. And by the same token, the potential in itself means that the person is the harbinger of the Christ, just as much as the one who is further down the path. It's just that they're a little behind on the learning curve. But that doesn't make them any less worthy. It doesn't make them any less divine. I like the Namaste greeting, where we acknowledge each other's holiness and say that the holiness in me recognizes the holiness in you. These are all kinds of interactions and joinings that are truthful rather than recognitions and joinings that are unfaithful to the divinity that is our true state, our true state of being. I've done quite a few episodes similar to this one on the ideal self or the true self. And I think this comes into play very nicely with the idea of beginner's mind and humility. The true self is not arrogant. The true self does extend grandeur, as I said earlier, because we're all Christed one in becoming and in expression. So being Christed does not mean no grandiosity. It means grandeur. And grandeur means humility as well. I'm so interested in finding teachers and colleagues who aren't wound up or bound up in their egos. I guess that's really the distinction we have to make here, isn't it? Am I a so-called expert bound up in my ego with a lot of information that I can share? Or am I a fellow traveler on the path to Christ itself, actualization, realization of Christ itself, and willing to, in humility, share that with you? Share everything in open and transparent communication. The person who is arrogant and filled with grandiosity can't be honest because obviously there's still things that they're hiding or suppressing and they're in denial. It doesn't mean that who they truly are does not include the grandeur that we recognize. Namaste to everybody, regardless of their state of awakening. But the Buddha said the difference between him and the villager was simply the state of awakeness. And he realized that. Not to lord over somebody. The Buddha always told his followers, don't accept what I say without questioning. Find out in your own experience. Really check out what we're saying in your meditation and in your quiet time. Excuse me. And in our introspection. This is a time when, the truth becomes very apparent. Okay, guys, let it go. We have a neighbor who is doing some remodeling, and that kind of upsets the puppies. But again, it's so interesting to teach this, and by virtue of teaching it, I'm learning. Everything that I try and teach, I'm checking out my own advancement, my own ability to practice what it is that I'm talking about. So, am I walking the walk as well as talking the talk? This is very important. I think that there's so many people who are hungry for authenticity. They're hungry for people who they can ask a question. What's been your experience? Who do you turn to? What do you think is the nature of the truth in a particular circumstance? How would I approach this? Well, the answers that come to me are really not originating in my mind, the finite mind, as a human being. They're coming to me through the infinite one, God itself. And if I stay humble and open minded, then I can extend that information as a channel. And I'm talking, and it appears that it's my speech and my thought. And in truth, it is my thought, but it's originating within the infinite intelligence of the universe, if you will, or Jesus as your teacher, or Buddha. This is where the infinite intelligence originates, and we are all, the channels or the messengers of that information. It doesn't mean in any less degree that we're benefiting from it. It's just that if I had known it to begin with in my human experience, I wouldn't have had the challenges. It's typical of this situation in this article where he says this woman told him, well, I already know that. And he writes, well, the truth is, if she really knew that, the challenge wouldn't have entered her life in the first place. Think about how many times you have been with a friend or someone that you're exchanging communications with, and they ask your opinion, and then they go blithely ahead and disregard what you're saying. They've asked for feedback, they've asked for an opinion, but they really aren't open. They really don't possess that beginner's mind. I know I've been on both sides of those exchanges, and what I find is that sometimes what's behind it, maybe most of the time, is fear. I may already know the answer. After all, the answer is always Christ. The answer is always the Buddha. The answer is always the Tao. The answer is always my higher power. Turn within and be guided. So, that is the solution to every seemingly different problem. There's one solution, and that's the infinite. However, I may be too afraid. And, that's a understandable situation to be in. If somebody experiences being afraid, and I find this in my own experience as well, it's helpful to begin there. I'm afraid. I'm not willing at this point to entertain what you're saying because it looks so different and out of character for me. It's so beyond the outside the envelope of my comfort zone. I'm mixing metaphors here, but you understand what I'm saying. Well, acknowledging the fear is a wonderful first step. And here's why I think it is such a good first step. Good. You've now uncovered through your denial, and you're no longer in denial about the fear. You're acknowledging the fear and the problem. You bring that right where you are, right where your thinking is, let's say, static, and you bring that to your higher power. That's the fear that the higher power can then transform and transfigure in your mind so that you're freed. The truth sets us free, and love casts out all fear. Well, infinite power of Christ is, of course, the truth, and it's an unconditional, loving experience. That's why it casts out the fear. Bring that fear. Maybe it's a sense of unworthiness on our part. Well, good. I'm not saying good you're stuck there, but good that you've recognized, oh, I have a sense of unworthiness. There's some shame. There's some guilt in my mind. And I just don't feel that someone who's as, what I estimate as guilty as I am because of my previous behavior and speech and conduct in life, I don't deserve the kingdom. Well, the kingdom of heaven is within all of us, and it's there to always be reclaimed. What we have to do, of course, is recognize the opportunity for redemption. Salvation and redemption clears away everything from the past. And by the way, it also clears away the future, because in the present moment, where we sincerely and devotedly ask our higher power, infinite intelligence, Christ itself, please take this fear from me, take this sense of unworthiness. I atone for the mistakes that I've made. Well, when we discover that we've truly atoned and we are turning to that unconditional love of agape love, redemption is ours. That is the whole nature, I think, of that process and system. Very few of us are saints who go to God in saintlyhood. What we're doing is awakening to our saintlyhood, to our godliness. But on the road, in the meantime, we make mistakes. I want to distinguish mistakes from sin. We're talking about mistakes here because the power of salvation and redemption means that those mistakes can be undone or corrected, regardless of how long in the past they may have occurred. That is the power of our God. That is the power of Jesus and Christ. Small things like this had no weight in terms of the miracle of redemption and salvation, the atonement. The willingness to accept the atonement for ourselves is most important because that indicates that we're truly atoning for our mistakes. Sin is too permanent a designation. The sinful are expelled in the story of Adam and Eve, and they're precluded from regaining their rightful position in the Garden of Eden. Well, that story I think is misinterpreted. I think that the prodigal son story is a lot more uh, germane to what we're talking about. The prodigal son goes out and wastes everything that his father had given him in the far country. He goes out and comes back, the prodigal son, and asks for forgiveness. And the father says, I've never condemned you. I've been waiting for you to come back. I never knew whether you would come back or not. Let's celebrate. Let's throw a party in your honor. All is forgiven. Well, that is the message, of course, from the cross as well. And I'm using this not in Christian terms, but in psychological and spiritual terms. The idea of forgiving people, for they know not what they've done, includes them and includes us. Nobody is exempt from making mistakes, but the forgiveness is a divine ideation, and divinity overcomes any mistake. Divinity overcomes any denial. Divinity overcomes any sense of being stuck in humanity and disregarding our divinity. So, infinite intelligence, which I call God, has set up a foolproof system. And the foolproof system is this: we are an expression of love. And love is always within our minds and is the truth within our very essence. We may think that we are fearful. We may think that we have uh, made mistakes and sinful acts of omission or commission. All of that is not the truth. Love is beyond measure. Love is infinite, and love is our true nature. So anything that happened that we regard as, so monumental, really by comparison can be forgiven and redemption is already accomplished. All we need to do is ask and the door is open. This is such a wonderful formula, if you will. Ask your Father, ask your Mother God. Ask for forgiveness. And you'll find that you've never really been condemned in the first place. Yes, we've condemned ourselves. And of course, that is the problem. We've but done this to ourselves. But the nature of the infinite is so beyond our comprehension at the level that we're bringing it a problem. As it says here, if we knew the nature of the infinite and the unconditional love, we wouldn't have the challenge in the first place. So there's nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed about. There's nothing really to be, um, so many people want to isolate and hide. Or another aspect of it is they condemn others. They deny their own fallibility, and they condemn others and scapegoat them and project all their sin and guilt onto people or places or things, and think that in some way that lets them have peace and serenity. But peace and serenity never comes through that process of what's called projection or scapegoating, because the idea is still in our minds. It's suppressed, it's still in denial, and trying to pin it on somebody whom we think is more deserving of the guilt and the sin, and we're not, leaves out the infinite one, leaves out our direct mystical experience of redemption and atonement and salvation. That's the way, not pinning it on somebody else while we're in the challenge itself and we come up with some human finite solution and we exclude God. That's an egoic solution, isn't it? I love the acronym for ego, edging God out. And when God is missing, there is no solution. There is a misidentification of the problem, and there is a disconnection from the solution. So we want to take it from both ends there. We want to identify the problem, and that is one of lack of communion with our highest power, infinite love, God. And we want to then bring that willingness on our part to the solution rather than look out into the world to see what false idols we can use, in a sense, to solve this problem. The answer is never in the outside. The answer is always within. The kingdom of heaven is within. Well, I think we've not exhausted the topic. However, I think we've gone rather significantly, I hope, in all humility. We've gone deeply into beginner's mind, and I'm just so grateful and thankful for this opportunity. We do a new episode every week, and it's presented on this NECAT network. So I would say until we see you in the next episode, and my thanks go out to NECAT and to the YouTube channel. We'll say shalom, God bless, namaste.